Okay, I got a lot of questions about the spinner, and it's really not too complicated, so I hope this helps alleviate some of that stress about a spinner. So it says that he completes 64% of his passes. So I'm going to just write 64% is a completion. And that means that he incompletes or has an incompleted pass 36% of the time. So I have two sections that I have to create on my spinner. Basically, a spinner is like the twister game. The big thing about creating a spinner is you want to make sure that your area is correctly represented in the percentage. So if I say 50%, then that has to represent half of the circle. So 64% would be like this, right? So if like this is 50%, 64% would be kind of like a Pac-Man. So 64%, and I'm going to use a key to help me know what that actual section represents, would represent a completed pass. Okay, and when you create a spinner, technically you have like this little like arrow because you're flicking a spinner, and the spinner is supposed to land on a certain region every time you do it. So that means that this section right here would represent his incompleted passes. I'm going to kind of color that with purple. All right, so those are my percentages. Okay, and what we want to do is it tells us how many he attempts in a single game. So in a single game, he attempts 34 passes. So the amount that he attempts is how many times you're going to spin the spinner. So if you're creating the spinner and you're kind of listing out what the steps are, I'm going to kind of do a bulleted. So you create a spinner. Where 64% of the spinner, so 64% of a region, represents a completed pass. Or I'm going to say completion, so I don't have to write pass. And 36% represents an incomplete. Okay, I'm going to flick the spinner 34 times because that's how many times he attempted. And out of that, I'm trying to see how many completions he has in that one game. So flick it 34 times. And then from there, you're going to record how many times he gets, or it lands. Let's say it lands because it's not him that's doing it, it's the spinner. So how many times the spinner lands in a completion region. And also, you're going to record that on a dot plot and repeat. So that is called a simulation with a spinner. We're going to learn a lot more about a simulation. But essentially, what's going to happen is you're going to create a dot plot. And on your dot plot, it's going to range from 0 all the way up to 34. And each dot on the dot plot represents one time where you simulated 34 attempts. So out of those 34 attempts, you're going to count how many times he gets a completion. So I'm kind of just going to briefly brush through this. So let's say I flick the spinner once, he gets a completion. I flick the spinner again, incomplete, incomplete. So that's 1, so 4. I'm trying to count at the same time as I'm talking. So I've gotten 2 completions. I got incomplete, so that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. All right. So that's kind of like if I flick the spinner 34 times, now what your goal is to do is you're going to count how many times he has a completion. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So on a dot plot, what you would do is you would take that 21 that you just calculated and you would plot it, and then you would repeat it like 100 times. But that sounds terrible. So we're just going to talk about how to set it up. But eventually that dot in the simulation and what that actually means is going to come up a lot. So try to make sense of it. I know sports is kind of annoying for some people, but try to make sense of like what each dot, what each simulation kind of represents.